It's a go.
All right. All right. Hey guys, welcome to the Swing Trade Monday session. Today I'm going to start out a little differently. As you can see my screen right now, for today, as of right now, I have nothing. And that's because I'm going to start from scratch with you guys, do this all together, and think of things to look at and then judge. You can judge it at the end and see if we should take it or not. But I'm going to start by just thinking of multiple sectors and pick one stock out of those sectors. I'll start now by picking something from the gold and silver and copper sector. We know commodities is hot. So let's do Barrick Mining, which is symbol B. Financials have been pretty volatile. There's a lot of weak ones, and there's a lot that maintain their strength through the volatility. Let's go JPM. And then another hot sector is the utility sector. These stocks are almost like defensive stocks. A lot of times they outpace the market when the market's going lower and they're less volatile. So as an ETF, XLU, it's a great ETF, unstoppable stock that one has been. And then let's pick something let's do like Walmart. I haven't looked at Walmart in a while. Okay. And then another kind of defensive, low key, big stock, Pepsi. Let's look at that too. So I'm gonna look at these ones. I just thought of these. Let's go through them. Let's judge them, see if there's any potential setups. Then towards the end, I'll go over what you guys want to see. You can type in the chat. So first, looking at Barrick. Let's get this going. Let's see, wave 3. One moment. My screen's giving me a problem. One second. It's not loading anything. Oh, here. There we go. Fractal wasn't selected. There we go. Okay, so wave 3. Let's get this loaded up. So it looks like we've been selling off in the short term below pivot. Let me type this in my other computer. This is Barrick Mining again. It's a $72 billion gold and silver and copper mining company. This thing was up 1.8% today, but down 10% in a month. Like I said, we've been compressing here. We still have red standard deviation. We're below this average percent below pivot. And we're down to this average move. I'd like to see if we can get back higher as this blue line shows. Look at option analyzer. We're at L4 with 23% odds. That odds number drops over to 4%, getting to L5. So very much lower probable. Let's lose more days as we increase the waves. Pull this back up. Okay, with 500 days now, the L5 is 13% odds. So still almost about half of current odds of 21%. The L4. If the percent band's on, we're at the 20% band. It's looking like it's due for, at least brief upside. Well, let's keep looking. The wave 7 here. There's no clear, buy signal. I'm not seeing that. Open stay at 39.81. The L10, which is 10% odds. And if we get to L15, there's only 7% odds of that. Only currents there and beyond. So, not too much odds for any further lows there. Though, this is what I'd be cautious of for further downside if we're trying to play long. This red standard deviation is still going higher. It's at the 2%, 10% area. It's possible, if it pulls back up. We don't see a L11 or L12, right? We see L10 to L15. So perhaps the L11 down to 39.81. It's possible. It's maybe a pretty big drop. but there's still no clear sign to play the reversion higher. Though we could be getting close. Let's see. Look at the wave 10, 2% or 10% level, right above the 2%. L10 there, 14% odds. Let's go to wave 20. 20% being there. We're below the average percent on all these. We've been selling up pretty fairly recently. Look at the wave 50. And this is what I don't like for trying to go long at all. I had this M that was just assigned, on 13, 3 days ago. Let's take this percent bands off so you can see this better. Although price is down here to this average percent, a lot of times this is supportive, this area here. A lot of times there's a lot of support there, and once that's broken, we can see a real sharp downside move there. But price will fight to get this vector in the high of 1. Get picture ready for this. Let's zoom this down. Let's do this. Okay. Something like that. So again, this line here indicates we're at a supportive area on the wave 50. And upon first test of this average percent, price likes to, kind of form a bottom, at least short term. It could be a bottom and maybe go higher and return back to the positive, above pivot. Or we sell off below and then we have an outlier kind of trend much lower. You got these open states there. From what I've seen, I'm gonna draw this in different color. Since it's such a high wave 50 daily, 1,000 days, I'm just assigned 3 days ago. From what I've seen, I'm pretty confident we'll see something like this. And then lower. Let me take a picture of this. Yeah, because we were in a K expansion cycle for a long time. If you look down here below, standard deviation, going back to, February of 2025. We've been in expansion phase, green standard deviation ever since, and we're just now getting an M as of 3 days ago. So why try to fight, the signal, M meaning compression, so downside cycle below pivot. Why try to fight that unless this turns back green? So I would not like being long this one, more so week over week or into the next month at least, from what I've seen. And we're getting down to some supportive levels too with these vectors. These high time frames, the price comes down to the vector upon first test. Most likely it's supportive, unless there's a catalyst to make a sell off below it. Then we get down one. But nothing too obvious with this one so far, besides that we're at a crucial level in the wave 50, average percent low pivot. We can see some brief upside at least from what I'm seeing, but I would see further downside and try to close these open states there. We got two imprint bands right here, around 41, around almost 39. So everything I drew out here is what I see going on there, but nothing too obvious there. So I'm gonna delete this one. Let's move to the next one. This is JP Morgan. Let's go to wave 3. This one's up a little bit today. Financial sector, most of the financial stocks were up today. It was kind of like a breath of fresh air for this sector. The overall market was up, so this sector followed. There's no catalyst or news to make it go lower today. Financials have been on a big compression cycle, and most of them, at least, have all due to private credit fears. So we're seeing some clues here for a high of 1 in the very short term. I would say day over day, going to, I'd say by Friday, there's significant odds of a high 1. 80% band at 290. I say that because we went from red to green standard deviation. That's 1, 2. Price is above vector. And now price is just as a remain above vector, has some strength, and we're due for this 290 area we got. The 200 days loaded. We're at L9, 5% odds of that. A little more days. Let's see what this looks like here. L9 is 2% odds. So are you willing to play the odds of lower than 2% for further lows? I wouldn't. I would think this one is due for at least a brief upside cycle in the short term. I could put a splice in this too. I'm seeing clues here of short-term upside with this one. I'd like to see a splice in a minute, but I like this chart a lot. Like I said, the clues are for soon upside is green standard deviation. Decay would be nice to get squeeze higher, but green standard deviation, price above the vector, and we're at L9 with 500 days loaded, only 2% odds of that occurring. So statistically, we're due for a high of 1 above pivot. Let's say it's around 290. Control this out. So this right here is obviously most probable. Further downside, outlier. Okay, that band just touched it to 288, but still somewhere in that area. Yeah, open stay at 292, 78. That could hit. I'm looking at so far. I see more of a clear picture on this one than B, Barrick Mining. I'll pull up a splice. This one. Let's see. Okay. Let's do Monday, Tuesday splice. Let's see what we have going on for tomorrow, odds wise. Okay. So we're here. Price being at 286.16 right now. At the 20% band. A little more days here. Let's look at this. So again, this is like going to tomorrow. Big drop from 29 occurrences to 6 occurrences there, 34% odds of L2. It's possible. All right. But the high of 1 is we have 80% band at 292. If you remember this wave 3 I showed, it said 290 or 288, the 80% band there. So if we get to like 288 to 290 range, it'd be great. Perhaps like a 290 strike call for this Friday. That's something I would consider. Looks like price is kind of going flat here regarding this. So see how we're kind of going flat on this 20% band. Perhaps it's acting as supportive. Any further lows be an outlier. Still possible. 279 at the 10% band is possible. But I'd really like to see this 80% band area, hit. Our system's showing that. That's what's most probable. So again, for JPM, let's check out, you guys can check it out too right now. Let's check out a 290 call for this Friday. That's something I'd consider for this trade. All right, let's go back to the wave 3 daily. We'll look at the wave 7. see what we got here. Take these percent bands off. And for those who use the system, a lot of times you have to hit the back arrow or the percent bands button to kind of reload them. Sometimes it's not always the right levels as you switch to the waves. But okay, wave 7, let's do 500 days. The L20, okay. We've been the M cycle, for about a month. And price is just not getting above this vector again. It closed a little bit low below it today, but it's there. I'd like to see this turn green, standard deviation, and price remain above the vector there. Then we can assume the high of 1 of 292. This 8% band's almost the same exact number as that wave 1 Monday, Tuesday splice. 80% band was 290. So I'm seeing a lot of repeating, areas. 288, 290, 292. So somewhere in that range, I'd like to see price go to, by Friday. So if you pick a strike, from 288 to 292, I'm thinking the 290. That's what I would take personally. Look at this, L20, 3% odds of this, with one occurrence. Are you going to bet on further compression, further downside upon seeing this? 3% odds. I really wouldn't. JP Morgan can be destined for further downside, maybe a little further out in terms of times. So, but we can at least have a brief upside cycle, let's say tomorrow or the following day, and then goes lower, days after. End of story. Statistically, we're due for some brief upside, if not longer upside. Wave 10 will show the same thing as 7 or the L20, 5% odds. I'm not a big fan of being in financials right now. There's a lot of fear in the whole financial sector with private credit and other things. But these stocks, even as they compress, by a lot, which they have, they always still have, very short-term bullish, sharp up days, kind of like today, in the overall market, up over 1% today in the indices. It's a staircase down unless if there's a catalyst to make it, gap down. So we always have some days like this right here. This big compression, short-term brief upside, then the upside stalls, and then further downside. So let's see brief upside again, and then maybe more downside, like that. Because the high of 1 always has to happen at some point. Happens 100% of the time at some point. So what I'm trying to get at is let's focus on the very short term of JP Morgan. I'm not going to look at any further waves. I'm really confident with what I see in wave 3 daily, wave 7 daily, and 10, and also that wave 1 Monday, Tuesday splice. Seeing significant odds for not only the high of 1, but anywhere from 288 to 292. I'm going to pick the 290 strike this Friday. And let's see if we can get there. These are trades that we like to take. Our system and what the statistics shows us what's most probable. And 290 by Friday in JP Morgan price is what's most probable from what I see. So that's what I'm liking with this one. Trying to wait for my chart to load up. Yeah, let's just get in real quick. You guys can type in what you think about that one. Maybe we can come back to it towards the end. But long story short, again, let's see some short-term upside with JPM this Friday. All right. Next one is Pepsi. I thought about this one a little bit ago. I know the consumer is weak, or on average. So it's safe to assume that the average consumer, is spending less on maybe Pepsi's products, but as long as they have some kind of growth story, they have some kind of new product loadout. I have to read more about it. But let's see what the fractal shows. This big rectangle here shows kind of like a rejection for any further upside. And certainly these open states, high of 1, rejected all those. We have red and standard deviation leave the golden area. So that's never great trying to play long. Look at this. We broke through the average percent before over here on the 6th. Got back above, went sideways, and now we're kind of sell off again. So perhaps this is due for an outlier run lower. We have the 151 open state. We can at least get down to the 20% band, 156 again. Price being at, let's see, the exact price is at 157.72. It was down 1.35% today. We had L4. Okay. L7 goes from L4 to L7, 40% odds there. We have a big jump there in occurrences. 37% odds of L9. Yeah, I'm not too certain what this will do. It's certainly possible to make some further lows first. This is not as clear as JP Morgan. So I used to work for Pepsi, terrible leadership and education. Okay. Oh, interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Well, with that being said, I wouldn't like to hold this one. Trade wise, may have potential, maybe not. But yeah, I would own this one. They can make an L50. Gotcha. Then look at the higher time frames. Let's see what's going on here. I'm just assigned, a little over a week ago, like 20. Okay. Oh, 100. So let's perform the average move up pivot already. You can see that. Let's here being way above the average move. Kind of rejected this open state 173.78 and certainly this one. Perhaps we sell off this vector 153.75. Find support there. If we do end up getting there at some point, this 199, we at least sell off this vector first and then go higher. So entering long right now looks like a no-go on any wave I've seen so far. So here, perhaps do something like that, 149.26, and then we expand higher. That's a possibility. I've seen something like that happen. I mean, we just got above the wave 200 with a high of 1 last month. So it's starting, as of last month, it's starting a upside cycle in the wave 200. We can see more compression there in short term down to 149, 150 area. And then maybe this goes higher. But I'm not seeing anything obvious to this one. Maybe we revisit it. Skip it. Let's go to Walmart. This thing has always had a high multiple. It's done pretty well versus the overall market. Wave 3 daily, or a high of 3 above pivot. Green variation, so bullish cycle is what we're seeing there. Has not performed the average move above pivot. Okay, wave 7 daily, KS sign on the 13th. 3 days ago. A high of 2. We have an open state of 128.80. Average moves way above there. We're above the vector. Everything's looking good for further highs. Okay. 62% odds of a high of 3. Very doable. Let's look at the wave 7. As long as this K can stay green, need the golden area green, looking good for further highs. Let's go to wave 10. Price really fought for this high of 1, high of 2, but pivot. K assigned, green deviation. It's looking like we're starting a bullish cycle, right? But can't last. This is interesting. Wave 20 daily. M just assigned there, meaning compression. A lot of times, this is usually when we get an M, it's red deviation, but there's green there. It's in the golden area, kind of confusing, but from what I see from a lot of stronger momentum stocks or stocks that have just been moving pretty well to the upside, they'll have a brief high of or L of 1, this, and then immediately go back higher for a high of 1. So that's possible because the high of 1 and L1 always happen at some point. They happen 100% of the time. It's kind of like a checks and balance kind of thing in the system. So you really got to watch things here. We're not down to the average percent below pivot or this average move. I would not like to be in longs if we get down to here, because this is about 123 area. Well, if this can get back above pivot in the very short term, they're looking good. Then we can be confident with their upside. Let's a little more days here. It's been a huge run. We already know it's going to be looking overextended on higher waves. Wave 50, wave 100. Yeah, wave 180 open way up there. Let's see if there's any open states that are kind of close. Nothing there. It's big open space. Okay. 722 high. So this might not be any further open states. Let's do 10,000. Just like to see what this thing is flown to. What is it fighting for in price? What is it targeting? Yeah, imprint band way up there at 230 area. Oh. Yeah, it's not too clear with this one. The only clear setup I've seen so far is JP Morgan. And personally, I only like taking one clear step at a time. I like chancing a bunch of different trades. So I'm gonna get rid of this one too. Now let's go to the next one, which is XLU, the utility ETF. The utilities have been on a great run compared to the overall market. Mostly because of the data center, story. But we also have our energy grid, infrastructure needs to be rebuilt, serviced, all that. So making, even if the AI center story, dies off, whatever, our infrastructure needs to be upgraded. At some point, we're gonna have nationwide blackouts, and that won't be good. Okay, so wave 7 got K assigned, green stimulation. I have 1. Same here with the wave 3. So bullish cycle starting out on both of these waves, wave 3, wave 7, for 500 days. It's looking good for further upside. to the 50% band, about $48. Average moves brings us above there to about 49. A lot of times I'll see price make a high of 1, come down to the vector for support in the following days, and then go higher, perform this average move. So that's just something to think about. Let's keep looking at wave 10 daily, got a high of 1. Green stimulation key assigned. You got above vector. And we're starting a bull cycle. That's what I'm seeing. I can pull a splice up for this one too, so we can get an idea of how good is the entry for tomorrow. Okay, we're up to 5% band area with this one. I like what I see here. I'm seeing compression there. Oh, we had strength on the 12th. Yeah, back above vector. Now we're kind of expanding. We got some expansion going on, and we have an open state at 50.82. So that's very possible. I'd like to see standard deviation remain green, obviously. Maybe hit the golden area and leave the golden area green. We had a high of 30 previously, which 16% odds. So go to L33 or high of 33, 10% odds. It's still doable. I just like I gotta see some further strength here in order to bet on this. Because if this turns red and the price gets back below the vector, it's looking like this cycle higher is ending. Let's go to wave 50. You were before this average move. Yeah, I gotta see some further strength from this one for upside, to play upside. Okay, this is the wave 100. Let's see at 52.36. I like that. It's back on. Okay, right at the 10% band. Like I said, has some good compression there. Now, potential further expansion. We're up to 52.36. And for me to bet on that open state to hit or not, like I said, I need to see some further strength in this one. Once into the splice, though, let's see what's going on in the very short term odds wise. Monday, Tuesday splice. Okay. Price is here at the 50% band, average percent above pivot, just about perform the average move. 20% band is next higher at 48.5. Yeah, it'd be great for playing long to see something like this occur. It's looking like in most times where we break below this average percent, the price kind of just stays above vector and just kind of slowly drifts higher. We do get an outlier cycle higher. So good. Yeah. It'd be great to catch one of those. And then we have that 52 open state open on the wave 100 daily. 7. I have 59% odds, 14 currencies there. So yeah, that's doable. But nothing, still nothing too obvious though with this one. Well, I see. So making this or making me think that we should just stick to JPM. What do you guys think? Type out what you think. I'll go over this one again for those who just joined. So what I like on this one is the wave through daily. One, so the strategy would be play upside short term. And the signs of that is one, the green stimulation We're just now getting that. 2, price above the vector. It needs to stay above this vector. And then 3 being, let's add more days now. Statistically, we're at L of 9 right now with only 2% odds. Are you gonna bet on further lows, under 2% probability? I sure wouldn't. It'd be a big outlier event to get something under 2% odds occur. As long as there's no catalyst or negativeness. So 80% man at 288. I did say the 290 strike for this Friday. I consider that. Now if we go to wave 7, okay, 80% bands at 290. So the first number we got for 80% band is 288. Now it's 290. Now we're at L20 at this one. This is 3% odds. It's L20. It's very obvious statistically that we're due for a high of 1. May it be brief or not, it's statistically likely going to happen. And then wave 10, kind of similar thing. Wave 7, 5% odds of that. So I'm seeing 295 there. So 290, that 80% band. 288, let's go to our splice. This splice is 292. So we have 288, 290, and 292. I'm gonna meet in the middle, 290 strike for this Friday. I want to see that close, or not close, let's say hit by this Friday. And not staying it too long. Like I said, the whole financial sector is kind of shaky. Also JP Morgan's being sued for multiple things, I guess. But there's the strongest one out there, in my opinion. Also like Jamie Dimon personally. He's been real honest about, how weak the financial sector is. So I like the leadership there. I like what I see in the fractal. And historically, even though we've been compressing lower year to date by a lot with JP Morgan, we always have brief reversions higher. So I think it's due for that. Seeing what we see here. So again, let's look at the 290 strike for this Friday. That'll be our target. In terms of stop loss, what could go wrong, right? We gotta consider that real quick before we get too excited about placing a trade. What could go wrong? Okay, let's say tomorrow we get under this 20% band and we start heading towards 10%. I do not like to be in longs at all, especially in options with price breaking below this 20% band by a lot and head towards that 10%. It's like a change of $6 there. I would not like to be stuck in a call this Friday, if price performs an outlier $6 lower. So I'd put my stop loss around this average move, because if we break below this average move, we're destined for sharper outlier lows. And this average move being at 283, about 283. Let's see, price is currently at 286, I believe. Price is currently at 286.16. If we get below 284, that'd be my stop loss area. Yeah, looks good. Yeah, I agree. So let's call this, I'll write this out. So stop loss area at 284. So again, if we break below this 284, for holding calls by this Friday, I would not be too confident we get under 284. Next, we get 10% band at 279. Even if it's up tomorrow, it'd be good. needs to hold strength. I wouldn't be too worried about entering calls. They're up a little bit, as long as it's up to 290, when the market opens tomorrow right away. So stop loss area, target area, like I said, for me is 290. Let's try this out. Oh, second. And again, I picked a 290 strike because with the wave 3, 7, 10, and this wave 1, Monday, Tuesday splice, the 80% bands that we saw, I'm seeing the numbers 288, 290, and 292. I'm gonna meet in the middle, 290 strike, pretty reasonable for this Friday. Price is at 286 already. JP Morgan was up 1% today. Statistically, we're due for at least a brief high of 1 upon multiple waves. Why did this duplicate? Let's delete this. Okay. Sometimes the system's kind of a little laggy sometimes. All right, I'm gonna label this right here. Target by Friday at 290. Okay. Again, for entry tomorrow, since we're looking at picture of data from today's close, even if we're up a little bit tomorrow, in my opinion, that's a good thing because that rejects, the outlier lower. So if anything, I'd feel more confident if we start a little up tomorrow. JP Morgan. I don't mind the calls being up and entering calls. Like I tell people, you got to flow, go with the direction of things. Find the flow of things and jump in there, and then you'll be taken in the direction of whichever way that flow is going, and it's look like higher. So, don't be irritated if calls are up a little bit, let's say 10 to 15%. They can run another 10, 50% or more, maybe 30, 50%. you know. Friday splice confirms high of 1, 2. Yeah, thanks for checking that, guy. Yeah, I can show it for the others. Let's take a picture of this. Okay, I can change this now. I'll show this for the others. Friday splice. All right, let's kind of fix this real quick. Set on WDD. Okay. Yeah, I'm about wrapping up my bit of this. We can go over what you guys want to see. Real quick with this Friday splice. I'm gonna put even 500 days on this. Okay. We're down to 10% band. Here you go. Shoot. These bands are kind of lagging a bit. Let me reload this. I want to see the 80% band. Let's see the true level. It'll load in a minute. 292 again. So, even better if it gets a 292 and we have a 290 strike, so be it. 290 is conservative. That's kind of how I play things. I find what's most probable, pick a conservative strike, with a reasonable time frame. And L3 here, 12% odds of that, 3 occurrences. Yeah, I'd feel safe going with this high of 1. So yeah, let's see like 290 to 292 play out. I'll read out. Let me go to the options channel or screen just to find the price of this. March 20th, 290 call. We get for about $2.50. So 250 bucks when the 285 is about 4.90, let's call it. So pretty reasonable gain there. So yeah, this is what I'm most confident on. Let's forget everything else. Let's focus on one thing that's clear and obvious, statistically from what we see on here amongst all these waves went over. And that is playing for brief upside. Like I said, let's say by this Friday, we see 290. That wraps up for this one, or my bit of this. We can now go over what you guys want to see. Let me know. Those that are in here, just type in this chat here. I see GM was the first one. GM and video. When people think of GM, I think, car manufacturer, right? GM cars. Now, these guys are a financial powerhouse. They do in-house financing. They're almost like a bank. It's almost like a damn financial stock. They do well. They make a lot of money. So yeah, let's look over this one though. Wave one, I'll pivot. Let's go to wave three. Okay. All seven. Let's do a little bit more days. Reminds me of JP Morgan a little bit, right? Because we can assume there's low odds of any further lows beyond all seven. You have an open state of 71.47, it's been open for 236 aggregations. 69.38 would be much lower odds of that, but potential. Also, to any of you guys who use a system, when you see something like this, let's say we're looking at L6 right now, and we see this big increase, of 5 occurrences from L1 from 1 occurrence to 6 occurrences. Anytime I see something like that, it tells me that we're really gonna get there and potentially stop there. So, and we see back to 1 occurrence, we get cut in more than half in odds, from 17% odds to 6% odds. L8, we're at L7. So statistically, it's looking like we stop here at this L6. And we put the percent bands up, and we wick down to the 10% on Friday. File support there. Green stimulation. It's due for high of 1 in the short term. Like JP Morgan, 8% band at almost 75, 74 and 3/4. Let's look at wave 7 now. Below the 10%, 2% a little bit. As long as the upside persists in the short term, the wave 3, then this will turn green. We get a K assigned. Okay, we're below the 10% band, a little bit below vector. And the wave three is showing us the clues of upside, soon upside. Yeah, look here. L22 is what we're at. 3% odds of that, 1 occurrence. Are you gonna bet on further lows beyond the L22? Below 3% odds. I surely wouldn't. But first, as always, I like to see the clues. If I'm playing upside, I like to see the clues of upside first. Because this can go sideways or it can chop a little bit. That's possible. If you're holding premium that expires, in a short dated contract, even if it goes sideways and then higher, you could be down. You could be right on direction, but you're off on timing. So I like to see signs of the reversion higher happening first before I jump in it. But I can pull a splice on this one too. We can see some strength, tomorrow, following days, and this turns green, get price above the vector. Yeah, I'd like to see high of 1. That's what's most probable, soon. So if I'm playing this, I'm playing calls or even shares. Let's make this line I drew the stop loss, or maybe like even this here. Let's say 72 areas your stop loss. We're right here at the black line now. And then we're going to target this 8% band area. Okay, put that there. 75, so practically 76. So you get in the call. I don't know the timing yet, but we can say we get in the call. Let's do a 75 strike. But if price gets back to 72, that'd be my stop loss. And I want to hold for 76, the 8% band area. Let's see, stop loss area at 72. Okay. Because if we break below this, this will be much of an outlier. We run lower. I'd not like to be stuck in that playing upside. Okay. Target area at 76, but I'm gonna pick a 75 strike personally. We can even get higher. We can get to the 50% band at 79.5. That can happen too. But I'm pretty conservative with my options. With the strikes I pick, the dates I pick. I'm gonna pick a 75. Price of the stock is exactly at 72.95. So if we revisit 72 even and break even below that, we really do not want to be stuck in calls. So hence that's my stop loss area. Take a picture of this. And I'm gonna target the 76 area. Okay, guy posted a splice of this one. Looks like the Friday splice will be one daily. Yeah, I'm gonna pull this up. Thanks for posting that. Looks great. Looks like we're due for upside in this one too on the splice. Let's look at this. Friday. Okay, look at this. Let's put 500 on here. So we're down to 72 area. Like I said a minute ago, with my stop loss being at 72, that ended up being perfect because if we look at the splice, the 72 area is at 2% band. And what we know about breaking below the 2% band is a very low probability sharp outlier. No matter which way it is, it'd be very sharp outlier higher, if it's going higher, and in this case, lower. So yeah, again, 72 area would be my stop loss area. And then 80% band at 74. So again, the 75 strike would do very well there. L3 with 11% odds, two occurrences there. That gets cut almost in 3 to 4% odds, one occurrence. I'm not too worried about that. Compare that to 13 occurrences. It was 100% time. I like betting the high of one with this one. So, and since the market's so volatile, there's so many variables, so many things going on. Let's just focus on what we see in the short-term charts. I'm not even gonna look at the wave 20, 50, wave 100 like I usually do. Because let's not plan to own anything, even if it's the option for, over a week or so. There's so many dang variables, in the current environment. So, but yeah, like I said earlier, even if these stocks are compressing, going down a lot, year to date, they're always due for some brief reversion higher, some brief high of ones to 8% bands like this year, like JP Morgan, like GM. I'm really liking these two trades. I don't know if I would take both. Like I said, I like only taking one at a time, for the longevity of things. Because the more trades you take at once, the higher the probabilities of you, losing money, right? You're taking more chances. So, I would compare these two and see which one's more obvious. Maybe I'd read about GM, the company-wise, I read about JP Morgan. So, but so far, yeah, these two trades, compared to everything else I looked at and suggested, these two have serious potential. They have the statistics, the odds for upside in the short term. So that's what I'm liking there. So next one you guys want to look at is NVIDIA. Okay. All right. Now I'll post all these steps for you guys in the chat after I wrap this up. All the pictures I took. 3 M assigned there. I'm not really sure what NVIDIA's destined to go to. It's been in this range, just going above and below pivot. Hasn't really had a breakout above the average percent, in a constant uniform thing. It's made brief outliers, and that's it. Nobody 3. 171, 177. Okay, that's your target. So it's a little bit downside. Well, on the wave 7 here, I'd like to see what happens. Looks like we kind of had a big wick up today regarding some news, probably some product rollout. The CEO always has some hype to add for these product layouts or rollouts. So it spiked a little bit today. But if we get below vector again, make it L1, I think you could play the downside. I would not enter downside right now, suggesting what we see here. KS sign, green standard deviation, above vector. I mean, right now we're looking at start of a bullish cycle. Yeah. You guys see how this standard deviation leaves the golden area. It's green right now. It could change, but if it leaves the area green, you want to stay long there. Look at this, right in the middle, golden area. Sometimes when we wake up like this, it should suggest that in the following days, weakness will ensue. But still above this vector, still above pivot, still have green deviation, K assigned. Could very well get squeezed higher than this 198. So be careful with this downside. And this is obviously one of the hardest ones to short in the entire market, Our economy, relies on one stock, which, my opinion is very unhealthy, but that's just the reality of things. GDP relies heavily off of this. Without AI, we're at negative GDP right now. So again, I gotta see what happens here. Look at this. We've been practically sideways for a month or a few weeks here. So which way is it going to expand? Or which way is it going to expand or is it going to compress? I don't think we reclaim 186. Yeah, I mean, we're not too far from it now. $3 higher. I gotta see more clues with this one. I'm not sure. In terms of, wanting to take a trade, I think you absolutely consider this JPM or GM that we looked at. It's statistically obvious, so what is bound to happen? Those are the best trades to take. We want to do as little as speculation as possible. You swung some NVIDIA calls. Okay. All right. And this is pretty crucial here. It's 212.19 open state. Price would love to take that, close that out. Standard deviation's red down there. If we get above this 188.199, so practically 189, if we get above that, you can finally see the continuous upsides as 212. From what I've seen in stuff like this, I want to say what's pretty probable is we close that and then we make the L1. Kind of make that kind of double top term that people talk about. See that happen a lot. So personally, unless there's a catalyst, I don't see a reason to really hold puts on this one. So I think for that. Next one, Intel. Intel 2 is another one I would not hold puts on. They kind of a longer time frame of things, like week over week or month out, because the government has a stake in this one. They're obviously gonna, do whatever it takes to get this thing going in the right direction again. It's had a lot of struggle though. But if you can capture short-term downside, go for it. If it's obvious, the statistics, what we see in the system. Yeah. I'm just saying, I'd not like to be stuck in puts with this one personally. Like I said, there's a significant stake from the government in this one, right? Lots of pressure for this one to do better. This has not really gotten anywhere since a few weeks ago, the 24th of February. Hasn't really broke out anywhere. So nothing clear in which way it'll go. Let's say today it sold off, right? Big red candle. Oh no, it was kind of flat today. So this one, yeah, run higher, but it closed lower. That's high today. Getting that candle. I'm not seeing anything too obvious with this one. So why play it? Kind of stuck in this pivot area. Emma sign down there. 54.60 open state there. If we can stay strong above this vector, so that's doable. But to get beyond the high of 113, it's gonna be low odds. It's 3% odds. So this one's due for some downside soon. Oh, sorry. Actually, I muted myself. But yeah, like I said, I wouldn't like to be stuck in shorts, but as long as we can see the obvious signs of some downside, I'd consider it. Let's go wave 100 real quick. Like then again, like I said, there's nothing too obvious with this one, so why play it? We found JP Morgan and GM, which are great. Their thesis for further upside, by this Friday. Let's stick with those ones. Let's not speculate until since there's nothing obvious. I'm at the point now where I don't see anything obvious or very telling. If there's no conviction for the thesis for upside or downside, I'm gonna reject it and say no. Because really you want, for longevity of things, you want to take the least amount of trades as possible. Only take the ones that are most obvious, play those conservatively, or you can, you enter the obvious ones there with a heavy position, and just trade very little. I could tell people I don't like speculating, especially with options. Let's play what's most obvious. 1 second, sorry, I had a phone call. Hit my phone. All right. On to the next one, DLTR, Dollar Tree. Wave 3 here. Let's go to a high of 1. I personally like Dollar Tree, Dollar General in the current environment. With this K-shaped economy, last earnings report, I think it was Dollar General, actually, DG, the CFO or whatever said, we're seeing an influx of shoppers with higher net worths going towards shopping with Dollar General, trying to spend less. Maybe they're worried about the economy or they're making less money or, their assets have gone down in the stock market, whatever. So we both have the average consumer or the weak consumer and now the, better performing income consumers shopping here. Well, on the fractal side of things, we're seeing a bullish cycle in the short term. High of 1, a pivot, green variation looks good. That looks really good. Wave 7, I'd pick this one maybe over Costco, Target, Walmart, some of the other ones. Dollar Tree, Dollar General. Go out and to the country roads. You always see a Dollar General, Dollar Tree somewhere. It's always people there, always the locals there spending money. Also people that are out of town go there, spend money. We're seeing an influx of new customers amongst different income brackets spend money there, which means they're probably doing more volume, right? Even though their margins are being squeezed, they're doing more volume. So that's always good. Look at earnings, right? So that's one thing to consider there. All right. So let's see, L12, 20% odds there. Yeah, this is looking good for upside. Looks like we're due for it. From the average move down to this 10% band. Above the purple vector. So we're seeing clues, for a high of 1 to occur at practically 120. Put 500 days on this. So we want to play upside. Again, what we need to see is price sustain this level above vector. Standard deviation to remain green, even get a K assigned to help us get a squeeze higher. And then this L12 is let's see, not very low probable, but below 20% odds of any further lows, right? With 500 days. Compare that to 5 occurrences. High of 1 happens 100% of the time. This has potential, good potential for a reversion higher. We kind of bottom out this 10% band. Mean standard deviation. That K would really help us get this 120. 35% odds, under 3%, about 15. Yeah, as long as in the following days, as long as tomorrow, the following day, things can remain looking like this, like green standard deviation, price above vector, then I like to see 120 occur. Let's go right at the splice. Let's go to like a Friday splice for Dollar Tree. Look at this. This thing might open up right away tomorrow. 10% band. Was that L5 or 3? L3, 37% odds. 3 occurrences for L4, 21% odds. Compare that to 7 occurrences of high of 1. So it's possible for L4, but it's more probable for high of 1. We got 120, about 123, 80% band. I'm liking this, Is it as good as JP Morgan GM? I would say it's up there. It's close. It's another one that's, dang near obvious or reversion higher in the short term. Yeah, the performance average move. Yeah, I'd like to see 120 hit by this Friday. Dollar Tree. Price being at, let's see, 114.36. It was up 6.42% today. Okay, they must have earnings. So this headline I'm gonna read to you guys. Dollar Tree surged 6.26% after reporting a strong Q4 earnings beat, issuing a upbeat outlook, significantly outperforming the consumer defensive sector's 0.54 gain. So like I said a little bit ago, this out of all the consumer defensive stocks, consumer cyclical, whatever, like Walmart, Target, Costco, Kroger, I'm gonna stick with this one. Dollar Tree, Dollar General, it was up 6% today because of what's to come, and that's better than expected future. You know, stocks tend to form on what is in store for the future, and that's better than expected, outlook with this one, and they beat earnings. So they're doing better than average consumer defensive stock or company. Yeah, this doesn't do its justice to show that today's candle was, 6% day, but it's due for a high of one. I want to see 120 happen. I want to see 120 hit soon. Don't be frustrated if the calls are up big already. I mean, if it's up after the open tomorrow, go with the flow of things, right? Flow is in the upside direction right now, right? Good earnings, that's a catalyst. Good earnings, good outlook. Stock's up 6%, and statistically due for a high of one. And we got 80% band in the 120 area. So to me, that sounds pretty great for reversion higher, further reversion higher after today. The average person would see, oh, the stocks are already up 6% today. It's too late to play it for further upside. I would disagree and say this is just getting started at the upside because what I just said about earnings looking good, outlook looking good, and statistically we're due for I of one. Standard deviation turn green. Let's get to the 8% band at least, if not further higher. So I'm gonna add, Dollar Tree to the mix of GM, JP Morgan. I really like it. Good find with that one. I did not realize the earnings today. Next is Lulu. I'm gonna go with the current ones you have in chat now, and I'm gonna stop there. So Lulu, Micron, Microsoft, Uber, Celsius, and then CLUSO. I'll go with those. Those will be the last ones for today. 8:30 Eastern time right now. But Lulu, wave one, starting a expansion higher. That's good if you want to look for longs. It's a little bit more days here. Okay. L10, 15% odds, two occurrences. There's a big spike in this L11. Two occurrences to five occurrences there. Like I said earlier, when I see something like that, in the data, from what I've seen in the past, a lot of times it stops there. L11 being the bottom. It may not, but what I've seen a lot of times it gets there. We see a big spike of occurrences from, it's over 100% from 2 to 5, right? And then from 5 to 1, so it falls like 90%. And then there's, so if we're at L11 or L12, yeah, I'm looking at longs for sure. Can longs still work out from today? Of course, yeah. but so a little cautious of this of the L11. We get the L11 down to 153, you know, then bottom there, and then gets the 80% band, 162. So going to the following days, if price is at sustained current level above this vector of 158.35, that does not sustain, we can see one more low, making it L11 down to 10% band, around 154 area, let's call it, and then reversion higher. But there is screen standard deviation. We're seeing clues that it's about ready for reversion after. Yeah, this year, 152. So something like that still is possible. Okay. Yeah, that seems right in between vector. It's 2%. Price being at 156. Vector's at 172. 2% being at 145. That's a pretty big range, and it's right in the middle. So it could really go either way. When I see this kind of scenario, I really don't like jumping in either direction. So let's see signs of a reversion higher in the short term, and then we can kind of hold this for a little bit for longs if it goes back this way, reclaims vector, gets green deviation again. There's really no knowing what it's going to do. It's okay. Okay, reload this. It's closer to 20% band. Okay, that last band I was looking at was a little off. That's like, yeah, reload them. But okay, so we're close to 20% band, but we can still go lower. $5 lower. I wouldn't want to be stuck in a call if you go $5 lower. So end of story. Let's see what happens here. If we can get a L11, then I'm gonna try longs there. I'd consider longs. We get a core scare high of one tomorrow. L11 doesn't have to happen, but just something to be cautious about. That's what I'd say for that. Micron really has earnings, right? This one's so hard. Me personally go over. It's just so unpredictable sometimes. It's one of those, semiconductor stocks that do very unpredictable things sometimes. Look at this big gap up today because of a catalyst, right? That catalyst being Taiwan. Was it Taiwan Semi or something? Announcing investment, Micron. Yeah, I know they have earnings. You know, pressures are very high. Stakes, the bar is very high for this one, in earnings. Kind of like Nvidia, bar was sky high. Nvidia still beat, on earnings. It sold off by over 5%. Will something similar occur with this one? I don't know. KSI there. If I look at the higher waves, it's obviously due for L1 amongst wave 50 plus 5% odds. I think we're so close to closes. We kind of waked up to that today. It's open state. Let's see that close or potentially overshoot a little bit. Then big downside would be my speculation. But again, use the word speculation. I don't like speculating trades, anymore. So let's stick to what's obvious. Nothing too obvious with this one. Go either way. So I prefer to not play it at all. But yeah, my guess would be downside. And like you said, Russell provided his analysis. Yeah, I can't view the earnings, splice thing he has yet. But yeah, if you go back to that picture he provided, yeah, I'd show for downside. I'd be much more if I had to play Micron, I'd be much more confident, with pullback than further upside. That's what I'd say for that one. You know, Microsoft. All right. This one closed by 1% today. So it might be another one that's due for reversion higher. You know, if you've been in my sessions, you know I've been pretty bearish to the overall market. Although I always consider the short-term reversions higher, like today. You know, there's no catalyst for, more downside. The market's obviously designed to go higher. It's desperate to go higher and wants to go higher. You know, people get antsy, put money in, volume climbs, so pressure for upside goes higher. And so there's a reason for nowhere for their upside. We're at L4, 3.9% odds there, some occurrences. Big drop to L5. Still 45% odds, two occurrences there. But we're getting some clues though. Price reclaimed vector, 398.71, green deviation showing up there. If I'm playing long in this one, okay, my stop loss is around this area. It's 50% band of 394, about a half. And then let's target 404 area, or at least 400. And yeah, that'd be it. Target 400 strike, I'd say. I guess I'm pretty conservative, but picking up strikes, stop loss around that 394. If we breach that again, it's going to be an outlier much lower. Yeah. And this can look better for upside very shortly. Yeah. 403 is this vector. A lot of times price likes to revisit this vector when we see something like this. Price break below the vector climbs higher. We see a revisit. 403, that's pretty close to that 80% band of 404.86. So perhaps we get to, 403 to 405 area. That's basically almost 405. So yeah, we're seeing, potential for upside in the very short term, say the coming days. So yeah, like I said, if you want to play upside, I would say, like I said earlier, there's so many variables in this market, so many things going on around the world to create catalysts for the market to go up or lower. And right now it's been much lower, year to date. I think if you want to play this for upside, you can do short term, let's say this Friday or the following Friday, no more than that. So again, yeah, let's target 404 area. The stock being at, let's see. Stock being at, oh, so it's at 399.95. I'm sorry. Okay. Let's target then, I'm not looking at the options chain now, but 405 maybe, or 402. Let's say nothing more than 405 in terms of strike. Because with this 8% band at 404.86, practically 405, we know we're kind of due for a brief high of one at least, if not further upside. So to change that, okay, 405 strike, and I'm not gonna personally pick anything further out than following Friday, if not this Friday. So that's what's safe about for Microsoft. What's the next ones? Uber. Okay. Let's go wave three. Take this real quick. So again, so far the average trades being Dollar Tree, GM, and JPM, all for their upside. Dollar Tree, you might be able to get a little bit more upside, in terms of time, regarding them having good earnings outlook and all that, maybe on earnings, and what we just saw on the Fractal. GM, JPM, at least we're going to see some upside in the very short term in the coming days, if not longer. Uber, a high of 1, a vector there, ASI and green deviation, wave 7. Okay, so if you want to play long, it's looking somewhat good. Seeing clues there above vector. It's 1, 2, green deviation. What was the low on this one? Only a low of 1. It could flip back to high of 1, you know, very quickly. 75.44 area. Let's look at this. I don't know what the catalyst would be for, being Uber, for being bullish on Uber. Besides, we see something on the fractal side. We have to see, these clues for reversion higher to persist. I'll tell you that. So almost perform this average move, high of 6. Beyond high of 6 is below 35%, so 31% of high 7. Deviation will need to remain green. I'm just not seeing anything too obvious statistically for upside. Right now we've been sideways for a few days or so. You can remain sideways, another day or two, or within the following days. If you're in calls that expire this Friday, or let's say the following, or just in short term in general, even if price goes sideways for a little bit, then higher, there's a lot of premium there. I'm just not seeing anything too obvious for immediate upside. It's possible we're seeing some clues now. It's just not as obvious as the other ones. I'm just not sure what the catalyst would be to be an Uber. Like I said, let's stick with the obvious ones, being those. Let's look at Celsius. This one, was it down today or closed lower than its high of day? Down 2% today. I think this is one I've done my research a while back. I believe this is one that doesn't do too great going forward. One, it's a consumer related stock. They sell energy drinks. A lot of people argue overpriced energy drinks, and they're, proven to be not that great for you too. So a weak consumer, why would a weak consumer spend, a lot of money on an energy drink that's really bad for them? It's a perfect storm for dying demand of product at some point. Plus, their margins are being squeezed with commodities going higher, right? With aluminum, tin going higher, all their overheads going higher, operation costs going higher. Unless they have some amazing hype story, I just don't understand speed on this one. You know, Look at this. Going kind of sideways here. If this can remain red and leave the golden area red, we could see a outlier compression cycle lower. Yeah. Look at that. So you kind of have some spikes here. I'm kind of sensing an outlier run lower soon here. And plus the overall market being weak. And like I said, with not just valuation wise, I'm looking at valuation. This thing's trading 174 times earnings, hardly making any money. I just really don't like this company or the product personally. I'm not playing this thing long at all, unless if there's some short-term obvious upside. If it's super obvious and clear, fine, play it for a trade. But to be long this one, in general, I'm not really a fan personally. because an outlier event can occur. Outlier catalyst can occur of, they forecasting much lower earnings, or they forecast a bigger loss than expected, or, you know, spending more money on, with operation costs going higher. They can report weaker demand, which I think they will. It's just a competitive market of energy drinks. You can walk into, you know, Stop and Go or Speedway or whatever gas station you have near you, or any kind of store, Walmart, Target. There's tons of, competitors, and a lot of competitors offer healthy or healthier, none of them are healthy, but healthier, alternatives than, Celsius. It's so dang expensive, you know. I really don't like this one at all. I'd like to short this one at some point and hold being short. Let's look at the Wave 100 real quick. Yeah, look at that. It's right in between this vector and this average percent below pivot, 37.45 open state. You know what I want to see is this right here. So that's what I think about Celsius. And that's possible. You know, the the business is not that lavish. It's tough. You know, it's one of the hardest environments out there ever, arguably. I think this thing's due for L1 at some point. I'm not sure when their next earnings is, but I'll tell you, I don't think it's gonna be that great unless they have some kind of hype, story, catalyst to make this thing go higher. You know, hmm, yeah. The thing is, you gotta be careful too when you follow these type of companies, because management is obviously gonna be a cheerleader for this company. They're, not gonna acknowledge any of the, downside pressures, at all, unless they absolutely, until they absolutely have to, you know. So, with their marketing, they can make everything look great. They make everything look strong. They can make the demand look strong. Man, why is it doing that? But what wave do you want to see with this graph? Open states. I'll take a picture. Is the wave 100 that I just viewed a minute ago, where I drew the line lower? This here. No, you want to see this one. Okay, too far out. Okay. Next month for puts. Okay. So when I hear month over month, let's look at wave 20. Okay. Let's see, 41 hit this average move, down to average percent below pivot. And I'll tell you, you know, if your inputs and you're holding them, let's look for price to reject this vector. This vector at some point will staircase down. Your inputs, let's look for price to reject that vector and go much lower to this average move. We got 40.94, and then we got 39.24. And potentially even further lows. Look at all these imprint bands there. All those imprint bands gives us targets. And then we got the 29.44 open state. So as of right now, as what we're looking at right now, I'm at L5. Puts would be my, preferred, option. Further compression lower. See this kind of spike there, L6, we're at L5. And then there's 3 occurrences there of L15. You know, see how we have some L1s, but it's not all L1s like right here. Let me see this. Three occurrences, the one occurrence. You see this drop off, and then it goes all ones. Usually, in most cases, this area, the L15 to 16 area, will be the bottom. Here, we're at L5. We have more occurrences of L6 than we have for L5. So L6 can definitely happen. Then we fall, briefly to one occurrence on L8. Well, it jumps back higher to 2, 2, 1 again, but 2, and then 3. There's more occurrences at L15 than there is L5. With that being said, we can definitely get at L6. And we're seeing no signs to enter long right now, no signs of strength. We're in between vector, in between this average percent below pivot, residue deviation, why trade long? I think at least we could hold for very low 40s, 41 area. So, and then we got all these imprint bands like I told you right there that come into play upon breaking below this average percent below pivot. But you want a picture, so let's do this. Let's target. Let's target area. Okay. I'm gonna put these on, take a picture. See, all right. Sucks at 43.61. Here, I'll upload this picture to the chat. Can't blow past 41, making lower lows, like I just showed in the options analyzer. Yeah, but I'd be very, confident in 41 being, probable to hit, within a month from now. I'll tell you that. So hope that clears up with 21 Celsius. And then we'll go over CL real quick. That being the last one for today. Wrap it up from there. Let's look at CL equals F real quick. Let's look at oil, crude oil. So where can we go from here? Had a big wick higher there, obviously. High 14, 1,000 days on here. Yeah, let's look at the bigger picture of things. Kind of hard to speculate what could happen. Just look at this. I don't think there's any open states nearby. Well, look at that. So we closed the open state, years ago, and we made a new high of 119.48. We shot down to vector for support, and now we're a little bit higher. The 50. It's so hard to say since we had that big wick higher. No, we know in the real world, our administration does not want oil going too high. And to combat these exploding high oil prices, we're going to release more and more from the reserves. So I'm not too certain, it can bet on further highs in oil. I think the catalyst would have to be if the war gets obviously worse and we start getting the word nuclear and gets people get a lot, both parties get more aggressive, fine. But if oil gets any higher than current price, we have some serious problems. Cost of living is already at an all-time high. Now we have higher gas prices now, higher utility power bills, higher gas at the pump. Think about, the petroleum used to make plastic and packaging. Now packaging products are going higher. So it's domino things. Russell used the word synthetic, you know, meaning that it's over exaggerated, maybe potentially just transitory, but I don't like using the word transitory. So yeah, I don't know. Targets wise, yeah, 199 is way up there. It's gonna give us a 5% odds of that. If we get there somehow, the futures, we have some very serious problems, economically. So I don't know. I'm not a big fan of betting on further higher oil prices. You know, sure, it's definitely possible, right? If this war in the Middle East, further escalates, you know, I just don't know that. Higher this goes, worse things get economically. So the higher oil goes, the more they'll release the reserves, right, to combat that. So there's kind of a cap on upside with oil. Like, can you short? I don't know. I mean, I think it's too dangerous to play at all. There's some oil stocks you can play. I've been pretty vocal on EC, OKE. You know, Even if oil comes down, they're still doing more business, right? So more business means better earnings, right? So the stocks do well, better earnings, better outlook. I think you stay away from the commodity itself, and let's look at something like EC, Petrol down in Colombia. Talk about this one a few times before. Found this thing at about $11.50. Now it's at like 14. That was a few weeks ago. I've been pretty vocal about this one. 41% operation margins on this one. We're seeing more business due to geopolitics with, people like India buying heavy crude oil. Heavy crude oil is what they specialize in. That's what they have in Colombia. India is buying from Russia because of geopolitics. They're trying to get closer to the US. So the US is making them not buy from Russia. So now they turn to South America. And EC is one that profits from that. That change geopolitics. But what I really like here is on the higher waves, we're at a pretty big high of 98. We have open state, we have above there at 20 and 12. This, if you look at the linear chart, like the max time frame, this thing's down significantly. This thing was like $30 a couple years ago. It's at 14. So you can very much call it a rebound play. Look at this open state 15.67 there. Yeah, 15.67. It's going there right now. We had our compression, found a stock right here at, a little bit above 11. Now we're expanding higher as suspected. I think we really get there, if not higher. Like I said, fractals aside, business-wise, they're doing much better than previously. Open state 17.83. This thing compressed down here, found support, average percent above pivot. And this is like the inflection point. Let me move this line there. So this line here. So we know when price gets above this average percent, above this blue area, above pivot, it's an outlier cycle higher, and then vice versa for lower. So from this high here, we compressed lower, found support at this average percent, we retested that, and now we're expanding higher, which kind of confirms that this is going to be a outlier higher and for longer. This is a wave 200. So I really think we get to 17.83, at some point, I can't tell you the timing, But if I'm gonna speculate timing, let's say the next month or two. Very, very doable. So again, personally, let's not play crude oil itself. It's too uncertain, so many variables. Let's play the stocks that have been oversold in that space, and then come up the upside. This one is something I would bet on for further upside. I've been long it since, around 11. I want to see further highs. So, and valuation wise, it's pretty low. It's pretty down, I think around 10. Let me check. 10 times earnings. 11.86 times earnings. That's 17% dividend. It's up 43% now year to date, but it's only up 2% in 5 years. So when someone's up 43% year to date, up 2% 5 years, that's a rebound play. And this thing's down 38% since 2009. Let me set a picture of this in the chat. And as long as they can continue see more business, if you like India, continue to see demand for their heavy crude in which they specialize in. This thing is a great rebound play. So I like this one. I like PBR, Petrobras out of Brazil. I really like the South Americas. South America is rich in commodities. You play the EWZ ETF. That's the Brazil ETF. I talked about that one before. But yeah, EC, I like that one. PBR. Let's play the oil stocks, not the commodity. So yeah, no, that's it for that. So all right, so now about 9 o'clock Eastern time. I'm gonna wrap it up here. Hope I answered all you guys' questions. To go over things again, I'm liking GM and JP Morgan. JP Morgan, I'll post a picture of these. JP Morgan again, I like to see the 290 strike play out for this Friday. Okay. Then GM, I also see short-term upside. So let's call it, maybe this Friday or the following. If you want to be safer, since the market's so being volatile right now, we could pick the following Friday for both. Me personally, I always approach options pretty conservatively, you know, especially in this current environment. Things are so uncertain, so unpredictable, so many variables. It's tougher now than ever before, arguably. So again, yeah, GM, let's see 676 or at least 75, let's say by the following Friday. And then JP Morgan 290 strike. I like that one. If not this Friday, the following. So yeah, that's it for this session. Thanks for joining, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one.